Hammock Street was a dead end. The last house, number 107, stood like a tombstone. Locals called it the residential asylum. It had once housed the mentally ill, forgotten souls left to rot within its walls. Now, it stood empty, a monument to misery. The new night guard Jack stood at the foot of the grand staircase. He clutched his flashlight tightly, its beam a frail defense against the encroaching darkness. Jack needed this job. He was desperate. But as the shadows lengthened, he couldn't shake the feeling that he had made a terrible mistake. Jack was a man running out of options. His life had spiraled into a series of unfortunate events, leaving him with no clear path forward. Eviction notices littered his kitchen table, each one a stark reminder of his dire situation. The job at the old asylum, despite its sinister reputation, was a lifeline. It was the only opportunity that had come his way in months. 2 nights of work, that's all he needed to keep a roof over his head for another month. He had scoffed at the rumors, dismissing them as superstitious nonsense. Ghost stories were for children, not for a man in desperate need of cash. Haunted houses didn't pay the rent, and Jack was a man of practicality. But as he stepped inside number 107, a shiver ran down his spine. The air was thick with an unexplainable tension. The old caretaker, with eyes as cloudy as ancient tombstones, handed him the keys with a trembling hand. His warning was clear and unsettling. "Don't go in the basement," he'd rasped, his voice filled with a mix of fear and urgency. Jack forced a smile. He wasn't paid to believe in ghost stories, but the caretaker's words lingered in his mind. But as darkness fell, Jack started to question his own sanity. The creaks and whispers of the old house seemed to grow louder, more insistent, as if the very walls were alive. The first night was a symphony of unsettling sounds, each one more disturbing than the last. The wind howled through the eaves like a banshee, its wail echoing through the empty halls. Rats scurried in the walls, their tiny claws scratching and scraping, adding to the cacophony. And then there was the laughter, faint at first, but growing louder and more sinister, a high-pitched manic sound that echoed from the bowels of the house, sending chills down his spine. Jack froze, his heart pounding in his chest like a drum. He followed the sound to a room at the end of the hallway, each step heavier than the last. The door was ajar, a sliver of pale moonlight illuminating a figure huddled in the corner, shrouded in darkness. The figure looked up, eyes wide and unblinking, a maniacal grin spreading across his face, as if he knew Jack's deepest fears. "They're coming for you," he whispered, his voice barely audible but filled with malice. Jack stumbled back, his blood turning to ice, his mind racing with terror. He spent the rest of the night huddled in a chair, flashlight clutched in his hand, unable to shake the feeling of being watched. Morning brought little relief. Jack was exhausted, his nerves frayed. He wanted to leave, but the thought of the empty fridge and bills steeled his resolve. Just one more night. That evening, the old caretaker returned, his face etched with concern. "You should leave," he said. "This house, it takes things from you, your sanity, your soul." He gripped Jack's arm. "That basement, it's a conduit, don't go down there." Jack tried to laugh it off, but the caretaker's eyes held a terrifying knowledge. He stayed. The second night was worse, much worse than the first. The whispers started almost immediately, faint at first but growing steadily louder, more insistent, more demanding. They seemed to emanate from the basement, beckoning him, calling him by name as if they knew him intimately. Jack tried to ignore them, but their insidious whispers wormed their way into his mind, gnawing at his sanity. A sudden crash from the back of the house made him jump, his heart pounding in his chest. The whispers intensified, growing louder and more urgent. "Down here," they hissed, almost pleading. He was drawn to the basement door like a moth to a flame, unable to resist the pull. His hand reached out, trembling, and grasped the cold iron handle, feeling the chill seep into his bones. The stairwell was a tunnel into darkness, an abyss that seemed to swallow all light. The air grew heavy, thick with the scent of damp earth and something foul, something rotten. He descended slowly, each step echoing in the silence, the creak of the stairs like a mournful wail. Figures materialized in the darkness, their eyes glowing with an unnatural light, watching his every move, waiting. Panic surged through him. He stumbled back, tripping over something soft and yielding. A high-pitched giggle echoed through the darkness. A man sat on the floor, his back against the wall, eyes completely black. "They don't like visitors," the man rasped, a smile spreading across his face. especially not those who pry into things that don't concern them. He lunged. Jack screamed, scrambling back as the man's hands closed around his throat. He managed to break free, running blindly towards the stairs. He burst out of the house and into the night, gasping for breath. He never went back to Hammock Street, but the horrors remained, burned into his mind.